Te Roroa's struggle with Allan Titford happened at a time when New Zealand was undergoing major political and economic change. The late 80s and early 90s saw the passing of the Employment Contracts Act and the sale of state assets. Māori treaty claims cast doubt over ownership of resources the government wanted to sell. In 1995, former ACT MP Muriel Newman, backed by New Zealand rich lister Alan Gibbs, set up the New Zealand Centre for Political Research. It lobbied against treaty claims.
The treaty has been adopted as this living, breathing thing.
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous because it's all about racial division, right in the heart of New Zealand democracy.
Well, if you look at the whole issue of racism, it's, if you take away a lot of the window dressing, it essentially is about seizing power. And it's seizing power by any means.
Justin Toa is a veteran trade unionist and Māori rights activist. He says the narrative of Te Roroa and greedy Māori continues because Māori treaty claims challenge land ownership in New Zealand.
And these people see that, well, as an obstacle to their aims. And so one of the first things they do is to either divide us as much as possible or to mischaracterise us, which is essentially what they're about.
They're only a handful, but they represent the thousands police and civic authorities say have complained about the Māori occupation of Motua Gardens.
Māori, including Te Roroa, pushed back against attempts to alienate them in the mid-1990s by defending their treaty rights.
Throughout the day, groups from around the country arrived to support the cause at Motua Gardens.
There were 19 Māori land occupations throughout the country. In response, the national government came up with a deal known as the fiscal envelope.
But now Mr Bolger needs to sell the deal to voters. To do that, he's offering the deal to end all treaty claims, and he's guaranteeing the cost won't go above $1 billion.
This is what we're thinking of fiscal envelope.
Protesters showed what they thought of Doug Graham's treaty policy.
While Māori were defending their claims, a handful of anti-treaty books were published and put into New Zealand's universities and our public libraries. Meanwhile, Māori frustration came to a head in 2004 when the then Labour government announced the Crown would take ownership of the foreshore and seabed. That same year, Don Brash gave his infamous Orewa nationhood speech.
In parallel with the treaty process and the associated grievance industry, there has been a divisive trend to embody racial distinctions into large parts of our legislation.
A year later, just before Te Roroa signed its deed of settlement with the Crown, National launched its Iwi Kiwi campaign. The man responsible for the campaign was John Ansell.
I'm not anti-Māori. I am anti a certain sector of Māoridom, which I believe to be a minority. I'm anti the treaty industry because it's been expanded and exaggerated and provably so.
John Ansell believes his agenda is misunderstood.
The agenda is for a racially neutral country where race doesn't come into it. The race that I care about is the human race. So it's the majority position. It might be uncomfortable for people who represent 15% of the population to stomach, but it's the majority position that we should have a racially neutral country where laws do not favour anyone in particular.
Ansell's agenda has been published extensively in South Auckland magazine The Franklin E-Local, a magazine which continues to defend Allan Titford's innocence and challenge Te Roroa's claim. The E-Local's a free monthly magazine distributed to 60,000 homes. Justin Toa says it's part of a right-wing network that seeks to undermine Māori rights.
It isn't just a small group of loose individuals making up stories. There's actually a concerted effort which has been backed up by a lot of resources, the likes of the Coastal Coalition, which was founded by former MP Muriel Newman, and also the One New Zealand Foundation. And a lot of these same characters are the same people who were campaigning on behalf of Allan Titford up in the Kaipara, in the rohe of Te Roroa.
John Ansell's part of a small team still campaigning for Allan Titford in the lead-up to his pending court appeal. Ansell says Titford's a political prisoner who doesn't deserve his jail sentence.
He's just someone who was particularly victimised by this process and has done an exhaustive amount of work to prove that the treaty claim on his farm was false. And the state, not to mention Te Roroa, the local iwi, don't like that. And now we find that he has been put away for 24 years for crimes that did not involve anybody dying, which is an extraordinary length of time. 39 charges of all sorts of things.
You see this one's been shaved all the way under there.
John Ansell's also thrown his support behind a researcher who says Māori weren't the first to settle New Zealand. Martin Dutre, author of Celtic New Zealand, disputes Māori tangata whenua status. He's taken this message on a nationwide roadshow with the One New Zealand Foundation, which also defends Allan Titford's innocence. He says New Zealand's filled with evidence of an ancient white people that weren't Māori.
They were described as being urukehu and kiripufero, which meant that they had the very light-coloured red or golden tinge to their hair, and they had the pinkish-reddish hue to their skin.
Martin took us on a one-day trek around Auckland, pointing out sites of significance that he says proves an ancient race lived here.
And you find the same sort of design at the east gate of North in Ireland.
Martin's also turned to genetic testing to prove his theories of Patu Paiarehe, the white race he claims were New Zealand's first settlers.
You still have many, many remnants of those people in New Zealand today, and they need to celebrate their ancestry. They're very, very long, enduring whakapapas that go back multiple generations, you know.
Yeah, these are the ones, those photos over there.
Martin believes this Ngāti Hotu Kuia, Monica Mātāmua, is living proof that Patu Paiarehe existed. Monica's blood DNA was sent to America to be analysed by the National Geographic Gene Project. Some of her genetic markers pointed to Iran, which Martin says could be her distant Patu Paiarehe ancestors.
The DNA test came through from Michael John, the e-local magazine. When they got everything together, it was the last thing I had to do. And it was them that got me onto the Geographical Society.
A paper on Monica's story was also written by Kerry Bolton, a former secretary for white supremacist group the National Front. Monica's story also featured in the Franklin e-local. Martin Dutre's received criticism for his position.
I wrote a purely archaeological article, at least helped with one, for e-local, and all of a sudden I'm a Nazi. You know, there seems to be this preoccupation with putting a title on you, putting a name to you. How dare you say that? That makes you a Nazi, a Maori basher or whatever. No.
Martin's accused New Zealand's academia of a conspiracy to cover up the truth about what he says is New Zealand's real history, and he's critical of academics like historian Paul Moon.
Well, on the surface, their agenda is to get to the history of the matter, to find out what happened and why, and that seems perfectly legitimate. But when you scratch that surface, then you find there's a whole other agenda, and the agenda seems to be varied. They want to deny that Māori are indigenous. They want to deny anything to do with the treaty. They want to upset the claims process. They want to change some of the laws in relation to protection of Māori rights and so on. So they're a very subversive organisation with that veneer of attempted respectability on top of it.
Justin Taua says it's important to question some of the mainstream narratives that continue about Māori.
Because this whole issue that is attacking our people is not only some little small fry outfit called e-local, but it's also mainstream print media, and it's also mainstream broadcasting. there is definitely a pattern to this. It is to alienate us as tangata whenua as much as they possibly can. And, but if you look at it, this is the same modus operandi that these types of revisionists have used throughout the world among other indigenous peoples.
So a lot of people thought, let's not give them the oxygen of attention, let's just ignore them and they'll go away. I think that has to change because more and more people are taking them seriously. Their views are being spread very effectively, particularly through the internet, and they're appealing to ever larger audiences. And there's the risk that some of these very strange ideas are almost becoming mainstream.
People like Dutre and Titford and the like, they're like the straw men, really. There's a much more insidious undercurrent running, and often it's those people with lots of financial resources.
It's been 28 years since Alex Nathan and his people first encountered Allan Titford and the trouble he and others brought to the iwi. Those who accused them of being arsonists and terrorists have never apologised, but that hasn't stopped Te Roroa from moving forward.
The way that we'd conducted ourselves throughout all of this time when we were being subjected to allegations and abuse, we held our dignity, really, and we just would not, for me anyway, I just would not descend to their level and debate it at that level, because if you did so, you just give it air. So some might have seen that as some sort of weakness, you know, oh, why aren't they responding? Well, that's my answer. You don't buy into that nonsense and give their weird ideas some strength or power.